I don't think it's difficult to create happiness. I think that's something that we each have a natural inclination to do.
Most of my life I've been depressed or sad. It's only been within maybe the last 4 or 5 years that I really felt like I've been able to manage that successfully and be able to find a happier me. What I always sort of imagined was, even when I was a kid, was that there was some kind of unwritten rules that everybody else seemed to know about how to relate to one another, and somehow I didn't receive the memo.
I was going through a divorce a few years ago. That was tough. It brought up a lot of course it brought up a lot of grief and disappointment of things not working out, but it also brought up a lot of questioning and personal challenges for myself, like, am I going to make it on my own?
From the age I'm at now, there have been many times that have been up and down. One of the challenges that turned me around was I was having some health issues in the late 90s and just concerned that I might be dying.
I felt like everyone around me, was better off than I was financially, with relationships, etc. Being diagnosed with high-functioning autism, I have coped with motor skill deficiencies throughout my life. So throughout elementary school, I was prone to being physically bullied due to being seen as effeminate, as well as just being seen as sort of an anomaly of sorts.
I think something happened around the time that I ended my marriage and walked away. I felt like I was sort of charged up with strength or boldness, and I kind of felt like, well, there's nothing more significant that I could lose at this point, so it doesn't matter, and I'm just gonna go and really be me. And I think something about my previous years, where I had spent so much time really trying to please everyone and being there for everybody and making everybody else's needs be met, I realized that, you can't create happiness for somebody else. That's something that we each do on our own, and we can foster it and encourage it in one another. And in doing so, I wasn't creating my own happiness either. I was kind of running around trying to make everybody else happy, and that never works. So, so being authentic and being true to myself was pretty easy after letting that stuff go.
I was challenged. I was at work one night. I was working in a psych hospital, and a young lady came in and told me that she had bought a greenhouse. And I had remembered a time when a man told me that jealousy actually was something that could be a healthy thing for when we feel jealous, that's the time you might go for a goal. And I remembered that statement, and this one was talking about the greenhouse, and I was thinking, I became real aware how much I really loved greenhousing and plants, and shortly thereafter I saw an ad in the paper for a flower farm in Hawaii, and it was almost as if Spirit just said, you need to do this. So I went over there, flew over there, probably within a week or two, and then I moved over in about 2.5 months. I made it all, I did everything, I sold everything I owned, and I went over to Hawaii and lived in a house that had no electricity, no water for 3 months. I have 4 grown children now, and they're all really flourishing people, and for them, for me to just go off to Hawaii, I think they were kind of surprised, but they kind of all just accepted it. This is really where I find my happiness, is by listening to my inner guidance.
The source of my kind of transformation that began last spring it began through a simple volunteer project. I heard about this nonprofit group called Hands on Greater Portland, and it was through Hands on Greater Portland where I found out that every month, every day on the monthly calendar, they had volunteer projects, that are posted up there and are provided to the general public. So I would, leaf through. I found one at the Hollywood Theater, which really, caught my eye. I went there. I served popcorn, and I helped with a cleanup and such. And I felt a great sense of accomplishment, kind of being on my own 2 feet, for a period of time, and helping out a community need, a community cause. Then from there, I said, I'll try another one. I had a great first impression. So I went to the Zimbabwe Artist Project and I volunteered there. You know, I helped set up tapestries and such. I really felt a sense like I was contributing to the world. I was really boosting social capital, and so from there it just exploded from one thing to another until finally I find myself 1 year later being the volunteer coordinator of a particular Earth Day volunteer project, as well as a recycling captain, and just tackling on all these kinds of projects. And that ultimately to me is what has really opened me up and sort of just splattered a whole bunch of different colors on the canvas of my life, and has truly made me, a much more capable, much more conscious being that I am today.
One of the ways that one establishes social bonds is to do for other people. Just so happens I enjoy doing for other people, but I knew that this was something that is part of social sharing, that is a necessary prerequisite for establishing a relationship. And that's the way I went about it. And it felt kind of cold, it felt very unnatural, it didn't feel like it was coming from a feeling place, even though I was doing good in the world in terms of being friendly with people, in terms of being honorable and doing what I said that I would do and being there for people who needed me. And over the last, I'd say, year or so, I have found that all these steps that I took that felt very unnatural and felt kind of clinical have yielded a number of friendships and social connections that I value a great deal, and I don't feel nearly so clinical and detached about it. That might have been the way I got from point A to point B, but I care about the people in my life, and they are also something that I'm very grateful for. This is something that I have never had before in my entire life. I'm 53 years old. I have never had this before, and this is wonderful.
I kind of embarked on this new sort of mission. It was almost like a mission to create new friendships, and I wanted to meet people who were solid and creative and interesting and doing something really wonderful in themselves, and also people who had a little bit of security and self-esteem so that it wouldn't turn into a dramatic situation that, so it took a while. It took a good, year or 2 years to start to meet those kinds of people and to really be clear about, okay, this is someone I want to invest time and energy into befriending and get to know them better. And I think once it started and I built one or two closer friends, it kind of rippled out and it became easier.
I started trying to look for beauty in whatever ways I could find it. I find that I still have these habits that when I'm caught up in something that bothers me, makes me want to go inside and dwell in the place where the bad feeling is. And what I have to force myself out into the sunshine, and I have to observe what is around me and find gratitude and find beauty. And I think that is as much a prescription for getting over depression as any pill that a psychologist can give a person.
One of my colleagues and a woman who I really respect a lot showed me this great little trick, which is you sit down with a piece of paper and you draw a large circle, and then you draw another big circle within that one. And in the center are your core values, are the things that really fulfill you, that you can't live without. And in the middle circle out here are things that are supportive, so things that would help you reach your core, things that you need to feel like you have the time and the energy to do the things that are the most important. And on the outside are all the drains. And every time I've done this list, it's sort of like a nice little self-reflection. I find I'm always appalled by how much time and energy I spend on the outside on these things that drain me. And interestingly enough, sometimes I end up writing somebody's name down out there, and I feel really bad because it's somebody who, maybe there's certain things about them that I like, but if all they're doing is draining me and it's a connection that's not working and not bringing anything to me, then it's time to kind of let it go.
One of the things that I learned in Hawaii from some people, the intenders. The intention process is very simple. People would get together and have a potluck every week, and they would share their gratitudes and their intentions. And then the group would hold you accountable to making positive intentions. So the language, like if you'd say, I want to try, they would say, make it a positive statement. So such that would be, my body is healing with every breath I take. I am living an abundant life, and people are flowing into my life that will bring me lots of fun and excitement. That's a positive intention. And then the group you'd say your intention, and the group, you'd ask the group to align with you. And so this whole group of people, you'd ask them to align with you, and they'd all say, yes, we will. And then they'd, so be it, so it is. And that process, what was interesting to me, I'd been doing therapy with people for years, and I'd been around different group processes. But what I noticed about the intention process is that very different people got together in kind of a spiritual situation, and they didn't have conflict. They actually supported each other and nurtured each other. And there was one very shy, odd man that came, and I watched his intentions, how he changed and grew the whole year. This man just flowered. And it was really wonderful seeing how that kind of support and loving kindness really helped people.
I basically installed like a secondhand smoke alarm, in my left side of my brain. There's this area of the brain called the Broca's area where basically the processing of words and language, exists. And basically it's like I installed it in there, and whenever I find myself saying the word should, it blares off, and then I just eventually want to get to the point where the word doesn't even exist in my vernacular. Rather than what should happen, it's what is that matters to me. It's what could be. It's what is possible.
Our language, the language that we choose to use, how we frame things is so important. If I wanted to focus on this negative story, I could focus on it for a long, long time and feel worse and worse and worse. And so I need to very much watch my language and speak what I want to speak, like talk about the things I desire. How do I want to have fun? Who are the people I want to attract into my life? What do I want to co-create with the people that are in my life?
I kind of carelessly left my digital camera out in the open on a flat surface in front of many people. It was stolen that day, and as you can imagine, anyone in a given situation usually might, respond either out of anger, as like, oh, that guy, it's like, why did he dare take it from me, or otherwise feel a sense of sadness. But for me, it was rather unique. It's like I had this sort of sense where I kind of felt that I was kind of clinging to that, piece of silicon, for like so long. And to me, it was, the interesting thing was I was thinking in the lines of, well, you know what, maybe I can't be a photographer, so why not be a model? And so that's essentially where my fascination with modeling began. I had a negative body image as recently as last year. And so, when one door closes, a host of other ones are going to open.
A week ago, I had a very difficult time with my teenage son. Incredibly difficult. I felt like I swallowed a gallon of poison. I drove home after this confrontation my son and I had had. And I remember thinking to myself as I walked in the door, what would bring me joy right now? What is it that I need to make me feel better? And the answer was blank. I could not think of anything that was going to get me out of this feeling like my emotional roof had caved in. And I remember just sort of interrogating myself, thinking, now come on. Come on, I mean, we've been through this process before. We have figured out things that are joyful for us. Come on, there's gotta be something. And so, like sort of an unwilling witness on the witness stand, my brain started to come up with, oh, well, you could take a nice hot shower. Okay, fine, that's great. That sounds great. You could eat a nice chocolate chip cookie. Yes, that would bring me joy too. You could crawl into bed and read a really good book. Yes, I could do that too. You could go out for a run. Yes, I could do that too. And after I'd really turned the screws on myself to really demand, come on, give me some responses here for what's joyful. Yeah, I came up with a short list. And I did some of those things, and that felt very good. It felt very good to know that there was something that I could do for myself that would make me smile.
I used to have a goal to find a perfect partner. I think when I got divorced, I was really wishing to have a spiritual connection with that person who's my significant other. And in the past several years, what I've realized is that I truly believe that my beloved is always that person that's before me. If I can get really clear and just be present with that person is my beloved. And if I can have that kind of presence with anyone, whoever they are, then it really fills me up. And it fills them up. And we both come away feeling pretty good.
The more that I really listen into what feels right to me without questioning it too much about, well, is this the right thing to do? And should I be doing this? And, you know, maybe I can't do that. It's kind of like, you know, I just get this silly idea in my head and I decide, well, this sounds really cool. I'm going to go do it. And who cares what everybody else wants to think about it? And it's kind of fun being a badass.
I had thought about the idea of going skydiving, and I'd never done it. And it turned out that about a week after I thought that, I was randomly looking on Craigslist, and somebody was offering to sell a certificate for a beginner's tandem skydive. And I said, you know, this is random, but this is what you need. And are you scared? Yes, but you're going to buy this and you're going to do it. And I thought this would be a very good bonding father and son thing if he was willing to do it. And I figured it was just bizarre enough, because he'd never seen me do anything like that. I figured it was just bizarre enough that he would bite, and that he would be willing to spend the day with me at this airstrip in rural Oregon, sitting around waiting for me to jump out of a plane. And he was. He said that he would do it. Once the chute opened and we were drifting down, and I got to steer the parasail a little bit, that was pretty cool. And so we landed in this like 25-foot stone circle. That was the target. My son ran up to me and he said, "Dad, I didn't think you were going to do it." Yes! Yes! I did it!
I always feel so much better when I go out for a walk, even if it's just in a local park, but especially, you know, if I'm up in the mountains or out in the gorge or something like that. I can be gone a whole day. Sometimes I'll go on a backpacking trip for a few days. Sometimes I'll travel to somewhere else, and there's something very calming about just being among trees. And I come back at the end of it, and I don't even realize that this is happening, but I come back at the end of it, I come back home and I realize half the stuff that I was worried about isn't really an issue anymore. It's not even on my mind until somebody else brings it up. It's like, oh yeah, really? I was worried about that? Why did I spend so much time worrying about that?
I always found that when I'm keeping myself through a constant state of movement, that I feel a sense of, like, suddenly I slip into a very conscious realm. And to me anyway, you know, there's this quote, you know, that really resonates with me, and that is that a day you don't dance is a day you don't live.
Dancing and singing and eating really well are probably the things that I do automatically when I'm feeling better. So I guess on days when I'm not feeling that great, or at times in my life when I'm not feeling that great, if I at least introduce a little bit of that back in, it reminds me of times when I was feeling better. So, you know, if I am not quite up to dancing, maybe I'll watch somebody dance, or if I don't really quite feel like singing, I might listen to some really good music of some amazing singers, vocalists, and be inspired at least.
As a younger person, I was in art. I really turned to art because I was so bored with traditional learning I could not survive in a regular college setting. I had a friend that was an art student, and I thought I really envied her, so I decided to become an art student, and I became a sculptor. And right now what I do is I've been making glass beads, I've been painting, I've been doing some sculptures, and since my kids have grown up and I'm living in my house now by myself, what I've realized is I've turned my entire house into a studio. And part of what happens when you do art is you have to let go of the outcome. And like, this does not look, for me, I felt very frustrated. I want their faces to look exactly like what they look like. And what I've been doing is letting myself just create something and not being attached to how it looks.
If you accept that your feelings are right and you don't editorialize about them in your head, you don't spin a story about them, you don't try and explain them, you don't try and label them, you accept them as visitors, you let them say what they will say, and you treat them with respect. They tell you valuable things.
If I feel all my feelings, if I feel pain, if I feel sadness, if I feel deep grief, then I can feel everything. And if I cut any part of myself off, then I really am accommodating and I'm not really being authentic. So to me, my happiness comes from being very present in the now, being very real.
The world is perfectly willing to throw something new in your path if you give an opening to the world to do that.
We can create whatever we want to create. I think it's important for us to remember that.
When you do remove something that's not working for you, it's creating space for something better to come along that might work for you really well.
You have to take into account that even when things may look bleak at any given point, that what would be perceived as a worst case scenario, often that's not where you're going to end up. Often you'll be pleasantly surprised by where the road takes you, and so what I would simply advise to anyone listening out there is that just believe that the universe is always conspiring in your favor, and when you do that, the rest is alchemy, really.